New polling from Data for Progress shows that 73% of likely voters support Joe Biden's American Jobs Plan. That's that infrastructure package. It's got bipartisan support across the board on investments in physical infrastructure, the care economy, and American manufacturing.
Editor-in-chief of The Real News and host of the Working People podcast, Max Alvarez, and senior congressional correspondent for the Daily Caller, Henry Rogers. They join us now. Hank, let me start with you. I think it's pretty interesting. This is the second piece of legislation now we've seen with supermajority support amongst the population. Last one was the COVID stimulus bill. This one is infrastructure. I don't have any illusions that Republicans aren't going to back up against this one, but I haven't seen any real effort in order to turn this into like a big culture war more. They're just kind of like quietly opposing it. What do you think that tells us about the bill's popularity and how the GOP is conducting itself right now?
Well, it's tough because obviously America needs infrastructure, right? We need help in all the areas. We need to rebuild schools, airports, et cetera. Everything like that we need help on. I think the Trump administration made some promises that didn't necessarily go through on that front. So as you said, it is interesting to see Republicans not really hammering them for certain issues. Like, for example, like the large tax hike, the large tax hike in this bill, or, the fact that it includes so much money for, historically black colleges and stuff like that, which we shouldn't have a problem for, but it's not really, it's not like that the heart of infrastructure. This isn't like, there's a lot of excess money in this legislation that shouldn't be going into this bill and should be going into other pieces of legislation. So I think that in order for Congress to compromise, which is impossible to do these days, there's going to have to be some concessions. And I mean, you have 21 Senate Democrats who are saying, they would like to see reoccurring direct payments in this legislation. Right. So clearly there needs to be some more changes for this to move forward.
Yeah, I think that's probably right.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I like to see even more money, but Henry does make a good point, which is it was kind of clever. They took a bunch of things they wanted to do and were just like, it's all infrastructure. Infrastructure is popular. Right. We're just going to call it all infrastructure, which is actually kind of a genius move, especially Max, because it's very hard for Republicans after Trump spent 4 years routinely having infrastructure week to then turn around instantly and be like, we hate infrastructure. So it does create kind of like a hard pivot for them to, not that they're not shameless enough to do it, but I think it's been too complicated of a maneuver for them to actually pull off.
I think that's right. And yeah, I mean, they have really, or I say Trump really did put them in a bind there. But to be fair, many Republicans kind of, didn't really pressure him enough to make good on that promise that he made to the American voters when it comes to infrastructure. But I will say this, that I'm watching this very closely, and I'm very interested in how this unfolds, right? Because I think, as y'all have said on this show, as I've said on this show, and I think a lot of others, one of the things that we were really worried about with a Biden presidency is that he would limit himself to the narrow scope of the politically possible in this moment. This infrastructure plan is, in a way, an attempt to expand that scope of the politically possible. I don't know if that's consciously what they're doing, or if, like you said, Crystal, they're really trying to capitalize on the popularity of infrastructure, because who doesn't love infrastructure? But and then smuggle some things in. But that's kind of the debate that we're seeing unfold right now, right? Like, that is sort of the terrain that Republicans are playing on, where they are making kind of, I think, standard and somewhat predictable, but not necessarily ineffective arguments about how this bill is actually smuggling in money for entitlements and social programs and things that aren't connected to infrastructure. And so what the Biden administration has a chance to do here is make a strong argument for how these things are interconnected and to redefine what infrastructure means, right? And I have some kind of thoughts on that, but that was kind of my initial point that I wanted to make, is there is actually quite a lot at stake when it comes to thinking about what infrastructure means and how these things constitute infrastructure. If they were smart, they would really play that up, because that will open up more political possibilities in the future.
It's funny, Henry, I hear that common complaint from legislators, Republican legislators all the time. They're like, well, they're putting stuff in there that has nothing to do with it. I'm like, well, why were you dumb enough not to do that for stuff that you like?
Exactly.
Whenever
you're just mad because they have a good plan.
Are you just mad because they're smarter and better at doing stuff than you?
and no, that's a great point, Sagar, because I mean, I think we all remember when Republicans had control of all three bodies of legislation, and they failed to do anything like this, right? And I think it's a genius move. I mean, if they don't need Republicans, why the hell does it matter? Honestly, what they need to focus on is people like Joe Manchin, obviously the most important, powerful person in the Senate now, and other moderate Democrats like that. But you know, that's a great question. Shoving other pieces of legislation into this is not a bad idea, considering it's highly likely a majority of the party will support it. And you know, Joe Manchin, you know, he'll make a couple concessions here and there, but I think at the end of the day, it's probably likely he'll support a large infrastructure bill from the Biden administration.
I mean, Manchin actually floated an even larger infrastructure package, which is part of why I find it perplexing that they offered half of the $4 trillion that Joe Manchin had been said that he was okay with. But Max, you know, the Biden administration, in a way, they are betting. I thought he would come in and be too wedded to getting bipartisan support in the Senate for his initiatives. And they've defined bipartisanship in a different way. They've said, no, look, this has bipartisan support among the actual people. I think that's significant. And they seem to be betting against total tribal polarized politics and thinking that if they keep doing these, you know, somewhat anodyne but still significant pieces of legislation that have massive supermajority, 73% support this bill has right now, that you actually can form a more durable governing coalition. Do you think that has a chance of working?
I do. I mean, you know, I guess I would be a hypocrite if I said it didn't, because this is what I've been like screaming about for years, right? It's just like, stop limiting yourself to like what the opinions of your colleagues in DC and start listening to the American people. And so if we are seeing that the American people are overwhelmingly in favor of infrastructure, kind of like advancing American infrastructure, why not do it? Why, like, it seems like a political slam dunk. But like, you know, I guess that means that the bar of our politics has been set so low that I can be this excited about a president actually kind of listening to what the American people are telling him that they want.
Right.
But again, I think that why it's smart and why it could pay off, again, is contained within the Biden administration's ability to show how this conception of infrastructure is the one that we should have moving forward and how it's going to benefit all people, and that there is no separation between kind of supporting the pay of care workers and rebuilding roads, right? Because infrastructure, overall, what we're talking about with infrastructure is the structural conditions for life to happen, right? I mean, think about it as like your body, right? If you want to live your life, you have an infrastructure of skeleton and muscle, but you also have an infrastructure of a nervous system, which kind of like includes the internet related things in the infrastructure bill, but also the conditions that allow you to live your life the way that you want to. Those include whether or not you have clean drinking water, right? That includes whether or not you have clean air to breathe. Those things impact your ability to live, and they direct what direction your life goes in. In the same way, this expansive notion of infrastructure really sets the table for what is economically and socially possible, how economic and social life unfolds in this country. And that includes whether or not working people are able to maintain a healthy living and save for retirement, right? That includes, I think, all the things that are in this bill. The Biden administration just really needs to clarify that for people so that Republicans can't make this division.
It's going to be interesting, Max. This is going to be, in my mind, the ultimate test of material politics versus cultural politics in 2022. Okay, guys, stick with us. More Team Rising right after this.